What's up, guys? It's your boy Gunner, GMoney Poker, back with another vlog. This one's super interesting today. Very unlike any other session I've ever played. Crazy hands happen. Definitely want to show it all to you. But first, let's show some of the cool stuff I did in Austin this weekend, and then get into some hands. This past weekend was full of fun Austin stuff. We had some friends in town, and we went to Terry Black's barbecue. I also played some golf and some baseball. I'm going to link my buddy's channel, AC Films. He recaps our baseball games. And look at this barbecue. I mean, if you come to Austin, you got to go to Terry Black's. Best barbecue, hands down. Definitely check it out. After that, we went and saw a band. Alright guys, let's get into some 4-card poker. I get to the lodge about 10 a.m. and buy in for $1,000. I see a few flops, whiff most of them. Nothing too interesting happens, and I had them for 200 before I look down at King Queen 9-5 double suited in the hijack. There's a $10 straddle, under the gun, and the low jack limp. I now pot it to 55. It folds around to the small blind, who pots it to 200 and says, I'm gonna get on that stream one way or another. Now this guy's been playing lots of hands. He showed down all sorts of different hands that he had squeezed pre-flop. He really could have any 4 cards here. So it folds around to me, and I don't want to fold a double suited connected hand in position. It's going to be lots of easy decisions on flops. He does only have 300 behind, which means if he does have a hand like aces, he's kind of in the spot he wants to be with a low stack to pot ratio. But I think that's kind of unlikely in this spot. Anyways, we're headed to a flop, and before the flop even comes out, he now shoves all in blind for his last 300. The flop comes great for our hand. King 7-10 with 2 spades. So we flop top pair with the second nut flush draw. Now in theory, this guy could have flopped a set. He could have a wrap. He could have aces with spades. All sorts of different hands, but it's 300 to win 700. I check my cards again just to make sure I have spades. And once I see the spades, I snap call them. We decide to run it once. The turn comes the 4 of spades, giving us the flush, and the river's the ace of spades, giving us the nuts. Our opponent turns over aces. We're going to take down a nice pot to start the session. Another opponent at the table says, hey dude, you made the stream. And I think both of them, if they're watching right now, they got to learn it's called a vlog. But hey, we won the pot, and we're headed to the next hand. After that last hand, a couple of guys at the table start talking about the bonus game. The bonus game's a prop bet or a side bet, and it has nothing to do with the actual game being played. It's just a prop bet based off the whole cards that you're dealt, nothing to do with the community cards. You remember this from my first vlog, and the way the bonus game works is if you're dealt 3 of a kind or a flush in your hand, you get a $100 bounty from everybody that's participating in the bonus game. If you're dealt a straight flush in your hand, you get a $300 bounty from each player. And if you're dealt quads in your hand, you get a $500 bounty from each player. There's no edge in the bonus game. It's a 0 expected value game, and you're basically just shuffling money around with your opponents, but it keeps the table fun, and the people who play it are usually good opponents that you want at the table. And if you want to get invited to big private games later, you usually want to participate now. So I say I'm in. Within 5 minutes, I look down at trip deuces in my hand. When you get a bonus hand, you announce fold and hold. You could play the hand if you want, but definitely not playing this. So I say fold and hold. All my opponents look real mad, and I show the hand to one of the other players in the bonus game, and each opponent throws me $100. Feels good. We're running it up with a little luck. Can we keep it going? Let's see in the next hand. We're now an hour into the session, and I'm still card dead, but I look down at trip 7s in my hand, so I'm the right kind of card dead. I announce fold and hold, and then this interaction takes place, and you can hear me laughing like an idiot because I'm pretty exuberant right now getting all these bonus hands. Fold and hold.
All right. Everyone's glad to hear that.
Anyways, I take down another $400 bounty, and we're headed to the next hand. I now go extremely card dead for over 4 hours. It has me wondering if I'm even going to have enough content for the vlog today, because I've only played that one interesting hand that I showed first. Don't worry, things get crazy in a hurry, but I have been getting some comments wondering what happens in these periods where I'm not playing hands, so I'm going to run through a quick assortment of them. The first one's Ace 10 8 Deuce Rainbow, which is just an open fold. Jack 9 5 Queen double suited, I see a flop and whiff. 10 10 Jack 7, I whiff the flop. Queen Jack Jack Deuce, whiff the flop. Queen 7 3 4, I open fold. Ace Queen 5 4, whiff the flop. Ace King 7 5 tri suited, it's just a fold. King King 6 6, pretty nice hand, whiff the flop. In this time, I do look down at a bonus hand and pick up another bounty. And seeing all these flops and whiffing, I would be down in this session if it weren't for the bonus game. So it is keeping me alive, but I feel the sun coming out and it feels like a sun run kind of day. And let's see what happens in these next hands because it gets crazy. Let's go. In this next hand, I look down at King Queen 3 3 in the cutoff. I have King High Hearts. There's a $10 straddle and the low jack and hijack limp. This hand is very marginal and could easily just be a fold here. Probably is just a fold. But I'm in the cutoff, so I'm probably going to be in position in this hand. And I decide to limp and try and hit a flop. The button now raises to 60. And I'm planning on folding and just admitting my mistake of calling this marginal hand. But after the big blind, straddle, low jack, and the hijack call, I'm getting crazy odds on a call here. $50 to see an over $300 pot. And I'm in position to everyone but the button. So I decide to call. I could hit a set here. I could hit a flush. Could make straights. Not the worst setup. Anyways, we're headed to the flop, which comes Jack Jack 4 Rainbow. So I totally whiff. It checks to me, and I have no business betting into 5 opponents. Anyone could have a jack and be trapping. The button could have a jack behind me, or a hand like aces that isn't going to fold to 1 bet. So I check, and we get some information from the button after he checks it back. He could be trapping. He could have whiffed and doesn't want to bet into 5 opponents himself. Either way, we're headed to a turn, which is the 8 of spades bringing in a flush draw. And now checks to me again. And given the opponents in the hand, I don't think the opponents in front of me are the type to trap with a jack here. They'd probably bet to get some value. So I take a lot of the jacks out of their ranges. The only player who could credibly have a jack would be myself or the button at this point, who could have been trapping on the flop. And I think if I take a stab, I might just take it down right now if no one has a jack. On top of this, my opponents have also watched me fold pretty much every hand, pre-flop or on the flop, for 5.5 hours now. So if I bet, my opponents are likely to take me serious. So I decided to take a stab, and I bet $250. The button calls, and everyone else folds. And we're headed to a river, which comes the Queen of Spades. Now, I could wave the white flag, or I could take another stab at this pot. But first I want to think through what the button could have. He could have a hand like aces or kings. That probably wouldn't want to fold to 1 bet. He could have a jack that doesn't have a full house, and after the flush completes, it'd be tricky to call with just a jack. He also could have a flush himself, but if I bet big enough, I could rep a full house here. Given my image at this table, I decide I'm going to take it to the streets, and I bet 600. The button goes into the tank. At this point, I'm thinking he's in the blender with one of those hands that I mentioned, like a naked jack, a flush, aces. And after 45 seconds, he arrives on a decision to call. He now looks at me to see what I'm going to show. There's no way a pair of queens is going to be good here. The button now flips over Jack 8. So I'm really surprised that it took him so long to call. He says he thought he was chopping at best. So our image is definitely tight right now. but no more after we run this bluff. And we're going to lose this pot, but I think given that he was in the tank for so long with such a strong full house, it was a decent play. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Feel free to roast me. But one thing to note is that the poker gods, they see our heart here, and I feel a little more sunshine coming out, and I feel the sun run coming on. So let's see what happens in these next hands. Stacks are getting deep at this game, and I feel the sun run coming on. I want to play deep stack against these opponents, so I had on for 3,000. The stack's now about 4,500, and there's some crazy hands that are going to come up. So let's dive into the action. Alright, this hand is wild. I look down at ace, king, king, 9 with ace high diamonds in the big blind. I finally have a playable hand. There's a $10 straddle, the cutoff and small blind call. I raise it up to 45, and now the straddle pots it to 170. There's kind of a weird interaction where he says he didn't realize that I had already potted it, and another player says, do you still want to pot it? And he says, yes, I still want to pot it. I think that he could have a hand like aces, but given that I have such a strong hand myself, and we're playing super deep, this opponent actually has me covered. I think I can call here and evaluate flops. So I make the call. The flop comes king, queen, jack with 2 hearts. So I flop top set. I check to my opponent since he 3-bet me pre-flop, and he bets 200. I think this is a pretty straightforward call. My opponent still has all sorts of hands in his range. He could have random bluffs. He could have blockers to the nut flush. He could have aces with hearts. He could have a lower set. He could have flopped 2 pair. He could also have straights. And I want to keep the bluffs in his range at this point. So I decided to call. We head to the turn, which is the 2 of spades. So there's now 2 flush draws on the board. I checked to my opponent, and he bet 600. This is somewhat of a tricky spot. I have top set, but it's the 3rd nuts. If he has ace 10 or 9-10, I'm a significant underdog. But he could also have lower sets, queens or jacks, which I would be crushing. He could have hands like aces with hearts, which I'd be a decent favorite against. He could also still have bluffs. So I now think about my options. I could call, but if I call, I could be in a lot of tricky spots on the river. Let's say it comes a heart or a spade that doesn't pair the board and give me a full house. He could pot it, and then I'm going to be facing a really tough spot where he could just have the ace of hearts blocker, or he could even have a lower set and be trying to get value. Now, would he bet a lower set on the river for value? I don't know, but he could have bluffs and value hands in his range. I also think about raising. I think raising has merit because, yes, I get called by straights, but I also could get called by hands that I'm doing very well against, like queens, jacks for lower sets, or a hand like aces with hearts, or a combo flush draw, which is probably close to a flip. I think about it for a while, and while I would get called by better hands, I also could get called by worse hands, and I think I would fold the ideal bluffing candidates that he would have on the river out of the hand right now and take it down. So I decided to pot it. It doesn't take him long, and he jams all in. Given the pot odds here, I can never fold with top set. And we're headed to 2 rivers. I asked my opponent if he has a straight, and he says, yes, I have a straight. So I look like an idiot here, and now I'm praying to the poker gods that they can bail me out of my bad decision. The first river comes the 7 of spades, and it feels like a dagger straight to the heart. Man, am I going to get stacked here after adding on thinking I had an edge on the field? That would be brutal. Come on, dealer. Come on, poker gods. Save me here. 1 card to come. The dealer puts it out. And it's the 2 of hearts. We bink the chop. Now I know it looks like I'm just an idiot here who got lucky to chop this hand, getting the money in extremely bad. So I looked this hand up in the solver, and I look at what hands I should be jamming with and what hands my opponent should be calling with. There's actually lots of pocket kings hands that I should be jamming here, but I need to have one of the flush draws. If I had spades or hearts with top set, the solver approves of the jam and actually prefers it. Without the flush draw, it's definitely a call, but it's closer than I thought. When I look at what hands my opponent should continue to erase here with, it includes aces with hearts, it includes flush draws that don't have a straight, it includes lower sets, queens and jacks, and obviously all the straights that he could have. So I think my analysis of what hands he should be calling with is correct, but I picked the wrong hand to make the move with. And like I've said before, when you win, and when you lose, you get a really valuable lesson. I'm just glad this lesson didn't cost me $4,000. And my opponents have now seen me play 2 hands less than optimally. So I just need to make a hand and I can probably get paid off here. And I promised a sun run, so you're definitely going to want to stick around for what happens next. Alright, time to shake it off and play my A game here. I look down at ace, ace, king 6 with ace-high diamonds on the button. There's a $10 straddle and it folds to the hijack who makes it 25. The cutoff calls, and I'm definitely going to pot it here, so I pot it to 115. The straddle now calls, the hijack goes all in for 125 total. The cutoff calls, and since this bet doesn't reopen the pot, I just call. The straddle calls. We're now headed 4 ways to a flop, with one player all in. The flop comes 7-2-6 with 2 diamonds. So I have a pair of aces and the nut flush draw. I also have a pair of 6s, which means I could hit 2 pair outs or trips. It checks to me. Definitely going to be betting with this strong of a hand. So I bet 225. The straddle folds. The cutoff now goes all in for about $800. While he could have flopped a set, he could also have lots of random hands that I'm crushing. So I snap call. We're going to run it twice. The top board comes the king of diamonds and the 7 of clubs. So I make the nut flush. The bottom board comes the 5 of clubs and the 7 of hearts. So I make 2 pair on that board. The cutoff now shows that he had a gut shot straight draw with a worse flush draw. And the hijack shows queen, queen, jack, jack. So he made flushes as well. But we're going to have the best hand on both boards. We're going to take down over $1,100 in profit in that hand. We're running hot. We got it in bad and chopped in the last hand. Now we get it in good and scoop this pot. And it's only going to get crazier from here. So stick around for these next hands. In this next hand, I'm playing a bomb pot, and I look down at Jack, Jack, 10-7, double suited. I'm in the cutoff, and I look down to flops of 8, 6, 10, rainbow, and Jack, 3, 2 with 2 clubs. So I flop top set on the bottom board, and I have top pair with an over pair, a gut shot straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw on the top board. It checks around to me. Definitely going to bet considering I have the nuts on the bottom board and draws on the top board. So I bet 125. Only the small blind and middle position call. So we're headed 3 ways to 2 turns. The top turn comes the 7 of hearts and the bottom turn comes the 3 of hearts. So I now have the top full house on the bottom board and 2 pair on the top board. I do have draws to better hands on the top board, but it's important to note that with 2 jacks in my hand and 1 jack on the bottom board, I block the nuts on the top board, which would be jack 9. Given that I have the bottom board almost locked up, I only use the pocket 3s, and I block the nuts on the top board, I want to bet a size that can get calls from my opponents, and then I can go big on the river if I don't improve on the top board to try and fold out hands that might have me beat on the top board. So when it checks to me, I bet 300. Both players call. We're now headed to 2 rivers. The top river comes the 5 of hearts, and the bottom river comes the 9 of clubs. So I still have top full house on the bottom board, but I only have 2 pair on the top board. There's lots of straights possible, but I do block the nut straight, and there's now a 9 on the bottom board, which also blocks jack 9 a little bit more, just in case 3 jacks being accounted for wasn't enough. It checks to me, and I don't think that my hand is going to be the best hand on the top board. They could have a 9x hand that makes a straight. They could have sets. There's a lot of different hands that beat me on the top board. I don't think I'm beat on the bottom board. So I want to bet big here and fold out hands that my opponents could have me beat with on the top board. So I slide out 2 yellow chips to signify a pot size bet. This is a $1,400 bet. The small blind's now in the blender. He's thinking about it for quite some time. He arrives to a decision, and he decides to fold. It's now a middle position, and she's deep into the tank. Probably about a minute and a half goes by, and she decides to fold as well. So we get this one through. The small blind said he had a set of 8s on the top board, and the middle position player said that she had a flush on the bottom board and a set of 10s. So our plan worked to perfection. We're going to fold out the best hands while extracting tons of value on the flop and turn. And we're going to take down another huge profit in this hand. We're running it up, and it still gets crazier after this. Let's go. Quick stack update after those last hands. Now sitting on over $6,000. So I'm up over $1,000 on the session after being down over $1,000 and almost getting stacked in that one hand. We're running it up, and let's see what happens in these next hands. In this next hand, I look down at Queen, Queen, Jack 6 with Jack High Spades in the cutoff. There's a $10 straddle, and the hijack limps. I raise it to 45. The small blind, big blind, and hijack call, and we're headed 4 ways to a flop, which comes 4 Queen King with 2 diamonds. So I have middle set. It checks to me. Definitely want to bet for value here. Our opponents could have draws. They could have 2 pair type hands. So I bet 125. The small blind and the hijack call. The turn comes really good for our hand. It's the queen of clubs. So we bent quads. It now checks to me, and it's going to be hard for our opponents to have hands that they can continue with after we have so much of the board locked up. I want to check behind and let them catch up maybe with a flush, trip 4s, trip kings, something like that, or maybe a straight where they could call a bet on the river. So I check it back. The river comes the 4 of clubs. The small blind checks, and the hijack now bets 300. Definitely want to be putting in a raise here. There is potentially an option to just call, hoping that the small blind calls behind. But the hijack's saying he has a hand, so I just want to put max pressure on the hijack. So I pot it. The small blind now folds. It's onto the hijack. Can we get some more value here? And the answer is going to be no. He folds. We take down a nice profit in this one, and we're on to the next hand. After being card dead earlier and playing a few hands badly, I'm now sitting on a pile of chips. So definitely got some run good, and we're sun running today. Let's keep running it up. In the midst of all this action, I almost forget we're playing the bonus game until I look down at 4 diamonds in my hand. So I have a flush, and I'm going to pick up another $100 bounty from the other players in the game. In this next hand, I pick up Ace, Jack, 10, 3, double suited. I'm under the gun, and there's a $10 straddle, so I open it to 35. Middle position, the low jack, hijack, big blind, and straddle make the call. We're headed 6 ways to a flop, which comes 5 of hearts, queen of hearts, 6 of diamonds. So we flop the nut flush draw. We also have backdoor straight potential having the queen. A king would give us a Broadway rep. I want to lead out here with a strong draw, so I bet 150. The low jack now raises to 500. It folds back to me, and given this price and having the nut flush draw and backdoor potential, I don't think I'm going to be able to fold here. So I make the call, and we're headed heads up to a turn. It's not a heart, but it's pretty good for our hand. It comes the king of spades. I now check, expecting my opponent to bet all in for $800. Given that I now have a Broadway wrap, any 9, 10, king, or ace would give me a straight, and any heart would give me the nut flush. I would probably have to call it off, given the pot odds, but that doesn't happen, when my opponent now checks back. We're happy to see a free card here, so we're headed to the river, and the river comes the bink, 10 of clubs, let's go, we got Broadway, it's the nuts. It's also a very disguised nuts. If a heart had come, it'd be an obvious front door draw that got there, but backdooring the straight, our opponent's very unlikely to see it coming. Given the deception of our hand, I think I want to go for max pressure here and jam all in. So I pot it. He thinks about it for a while. He's deep into the tank. After about a minute, he makes a very dramatic call and he flicks in the chip. I show him Broadway. He looks pretty unhappy and he pulls 2 6s from his hand for a flop set. Throws the chips in the middle. And we're going to take down another huge pot here. Almost $3,000 on this one. Let's go. After that last hand, I'm now sitting on over $8,000. We definitely turned the session around today and sun run. I see a few more flops before deciding to rack up a profit for the day. Let's head to the cage. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the vlog today. That was a crazy session. I went from being card dead to bluffing to having that king's hand to then sun running. So definitely happy with how things turned out. I appreciate everyone that's been liking and subscribing to these videos. It's gotten to the point where my fiance is starting to take me serious with this. She now calls me G-Money when I'm walking around the house. And whenever I'm editing my videos, she says I'm in the lab. So hey, it's working. Appreciate you all and see you back for the next vlog.